Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ellie, and today we're going to pinpoint the differences between British and American English and try to answer the question, are they even the same language? Disclaimer, I am not going into detail about the different types of accents in the UK and the USA, like for example Geordie or Deep Southern accent. I'm generalizing the two sides, Queen's English and Americanese. So let's begin with pronunciation and accent. The first thing that you must have noticed at some point of your English education is the R sound. Whereas Americans always make sure it's audible, British people absolutely disregard it if it's not followed by a vowel. I'm going to read out the first line of words for you in both accents, and I really want you to notice how the Americans pronounce a short vowel before a R sound, whereas the British use long vowels and no R sound. Listen. American. Water, murderer, literature, organism, work, hard. British. Water, murderer, literature, organism, work, hard. Second, sometimes A is pronounced as a long A sound in British English and as a short, rather E sound in American English. Listen. American. Dance, can't, fan, stand, damn. British English. Dance, can't, fun, stand, damn. 3. In American English, O is sometimes pronounced as a sound that rather resembles A, like for instance, God, stop, got, body, a lot of. Whereas in British English, the O sound is really nice and round and audible, like God, stop, got, body, a lot of. 4. We've got the American as opposed to the British A. Now, listen. American. But, country, understand, much. British. But, country, understand, much. You see, in the British pronunciation, you have your mouth really open and the sound more resembles A rather than A. And the next situation I absolutely hate because it's in my name, and when Americans pronounce it, my stomach turns. For the fifth line of words, an American one would pronounce them like really, Ellie, lemon, blue, play, whereas a British person would pronounce them like really, Ellie, lemon, blue, play. You see the really nice li and le syllables as opposed to li and lay. And I'm just going to ask you to call me Ellie, not Ellie. Thank you very much. Now the next situation has to do with the T's and D's. Americans sometimes tend to butcher those sounds so that they sound more like R, like for instance gotta, water, beautiful, I don't know, better, British. Meanwhile, in British English, you get a clear T and D sound that sometimes sound a little like T. Listen. Got to, water, beautiful, I don't know, better, British, which you might hear pronounced like British. Now you might ask where the T is. Well, the British drank it all. Pun absolutely intended. And I've also included some peculiar occurrences in both accents, like for example the O sound in British accent, like in the words hello, no, over, hope, etc. And another bizarre thing is that they squeeze in a R sound in between two words, the former of which ends in a vowel and the latter of which starts with a vowel, like for instance vanilla ice cream or the idea of something, they saw it, etc. You know, it's really peculiar, but it's there. And in American accent, you will hear a friend of mine, semi-decent, antidepressant. And while it has nothing to do with British English, you might hear more and more British people pronounce these words the American way because it's getting more and more popular. But in typical British English, these words sound like a friend of mine, semi-decent, antidepressant. Moving on. By the way, did you know that British teachers apologise when they play an audio or a video in American English in class? I just thought that was funny. Anyway, moving on to general spelling. As you see, the words that end in O-U-R in British spelling, because of their French origin, seem to be missing the U in American spelling, like the words favourite, colour, behaviour, labour, and so on. Now, you have to allow me to show you a meme. I'll just let it sink in. As it turns out, America's just trying to get rid of you. Anyway, back to spelling. Now, some verbs that are spelled with I-Z-E or Y-Z-E in American spelling can be spelled with an S in British spelling, like realise, organise, recognise, etc. But I do believe both are acceptable. Now, another difference is that in British spelling, some words end in RE, like meter, litre, theatre, and centre. Whereas in American spelling, it's quite the opposite. The words end in ER. Is this an act of defiance? We don't know. You'll also notice that in British English, some words, for example, like all the derivatives of the verb travel, you know, traveller, travelling, travelled, etc., are spelt with a double consonant, whereas in American spelling, there is a single consonant. Now, there are also some differences in the spelling of some words like defense, offense, license, and pretense, and so on. It blew my mind that in American English, they're spelt with an S rather than a C. And I actually looked up how the American Department of Defense is spelled, and funnily enough, it's actually spelled with an S. Next up, you must know both spellings of the word program, nothing new about that. And the last difference that I've got covered is that words such as dialogue, analogue, etc., they might be missing the UE in American English. I guess, depends on whatever floats your boat. Moving on to grammar. To start off with, now we all know that the British past participle of the verb get is got, and the American is gotten. Nothing new here. Like your British friend would say, this party's got boring, whereas your American friend would say, this party's gotten boring. And now, a British person would refer to something they did with their friends using the phrase, my friends and I, whereas an American would employ the phrase, me and my friends. I guess Americans like putting themselves first, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know, your British friend would say, my friends and I went ice skating yesterday, whereas your American friend would say, me and my friends went ice skating yesterday. Another thing the Americans tend to do is replace all tag questions with just, right? You know, a British person would ask me, your name's Ellie, isn't it? And an American person will ask me, your name's Ellie, right? I guess it's just easier to replace all tag questions with just right. Now, there are also different usages of prepositions in American and British English, and I don't know why this has occurred, but, you know, I've included these two examples. You know, I met him and I wrote to her, as opposed to I met with him, I wrote her. I guess just use whatever floats your boat. Now, there is also a situation where the British tends to use a plural form, whereas the Americans just skip the S. Like, for instance, a British student would say, I've headed towards my maths class. while an American student would say, I've headed toward my math class. And I've actually witnessed an American get confused when they hear maths. They were like, maths? Why so many? It's just one math. And I just thought that was funny. And now this one got me baffled. For the past years, we've all been taught that when we refer to the results of an action, we use a present perfect tense. Fair enough, that's what British people do. Like your British friend would say, everything seems to make you laugh. Have you been drinking? The Americans, however, tend to just employ the past simple tense in every situation referring to a past action. Your American friend would say, everything seems to make you laugh. Did you drink? Now that's obviously acceptable in American grammar, but I advise you, please do stick to British grammar when it comes to exams and formal conversations. Now another example of that is the question, are you coming to the show tonight? A British person would answer, no, I've already seen it. That's the result of a past action. Whereas an American would answer, no, I already saw it. That's something I did in the past, so I'm just employing the past simple tense. The last difference in grammar has to do with verb agreement with collective nouns. Now what I just said might not ring any bells, so let me explain. Collective nouns refer to particular groups of people or objects. Example given, staff, government, police, class, team, etc. In British English, they can be followed by a singular or a plural verb, depending on whether the group is thought of as a whole or as many individuals. Both are acceptable. In the first example here, my team is winning, the team is thought of as a whole. Whereas in the second example, the other team are all sitting down, we are referring to each and every individual of the other team. That's why we're using a plural verb. And you might hear a British person say which team is winning, you might hear them say which team are winning. Both are acceptable. In American English, however, you just use a singular form of the verb and don't think too much about it. An American would say which team is losing or winning or whatever. Just the singular verb. Now, I think we can all agree that the Americans have got a little lazy with their grammar, so please allow me yet another meme. I'm letting that sink in, and I really hope no one's offended, because that is not by any means what I mean. Anyway, moving on to vocabulary. It's no secret that Americans and British refer to same objects with different nouns. And that's why there is this funny misunderstanding here. The Americans just trying to compliment somebody's trousers because, as we all know, American people refer to any piece of clothing below the waist as pants. However, if you ever hear a British person say pants, which will be rarely ever, they will be referring to underwear. And that's why they're like, why are you talking about my underwear? Anyway, such differences in vocabulary include, but are not limited to, autumn as opposed to fall, biscuit as opposed to cookie, crisps as opposed to chips, and chips as opposed to French fries, which might be confusing, sweet as opposed to candy, pavement as opposed to sidewalk, cinema as opposed to theatre or the movies or whatever else the Americans have came up with, mobile phone as opposed to cell phone, football as opposed to soccer, trash bin or just bin as opposed to trash can, lift as opposed to elevator, cash point as opposed to ATM, and car's boot as opposed to trunk. Lorry as opposed to truck, and my two personal favourites, aubergine as opposed to eggplant, and courgettes as opposed to zucchini. Your British friend would say a flat and a block of flats, whereas your American friend would say an apartment and an apartment building. You've got a caravan as opposed to trailer, a chemist as opposed to a drugstore or a pharmacy, trousers as opposed to pants, which we already covered, petrol as opposed to gas, tin as opposed to can, and now that doesn't mean you'll never hear a British person say a can of something, but when they do, they will be referring to canned drinks. You know, they would say a tin of beans and a can of cola, but a British person would not say a can of beans. You've got torch as opposed to flashlight, and one that really intrigued me. You've got tic-tac-toe as opposed to noughts and crosses. And now, I don't know just how many British people refer to this game as noughts and crosses, but there's that name. Now, to wrap it up, I've written you a text. The first version of the text is written in the typical British fashion in terms of grammar, spelling, vocabulary, and slang. I'll read it out for you in a British accent. Now, the second version of the text is written in an American fashion in terms of grammar, spelling, vocabulary, and slang, and I will give you my best attempt at American accent, which you have to forgive me. Now, I really want you to listen. Notice the differences between the accent and the written text. The British way. Hello, I'm Ellie and I'm in my school year 11. My favourite colour is green, my favourite season is autumn, and I bloody love dancing and watching football. I really can't stand country music, but I've got to say, I Will Away by Mumford & Sons is a beautiful song. My friends and I enjoy organising cookouts. We prepare delicious food together, treat ourselves to some sweets. Of course, not without the occasional, goodness gracious, I got so chubby, codswallow. And instead of gaming on our mobile phones, we play noughts and crosses and have a good old chinwag. Sounds quite good, doesn't it? The American way. Hello, I'm Ellie and I'm in the 11th grade. My favourite colour is green, my favourite season is fall, and I fucking love dancing and watching soccer. I really can't stand country music, but I gotta say, I Will Away by Mumford & Sons is a beautiful song. Me and my friends enjoy organising cookouts. We prepare delicious food together, treat ourselves to some candy, of course, not without the occasional, oh my god, I got so chubby nonsense. And instead of gaming on our cell phones, we play tic-tac-toe and have long and pleasant conversations. Sounds pretty good, right? Goodness gracious, I failed this thing, didn't I? Forgive me for that. Now let me go over some differences in British and American slang. You know, you've got the typically British bloody as opposed to, you know, the effing. And you've got the typical British goodness gracious as opposed to oh my god. And now my absolutely favourite piece of British slang is codswallow. It means nonsense, and it just sounds so fun and satisfying, you know, codswallow. I just love it. And the expression to have a good old chinwag, it basically means to have long and pleasant conversations. And I believe that's pretty much all for today. Thank you so much for your attention, blokes, and because you've been such good listeners, I've prepared a meme for you. You know, it's a good thing the Queen doesn't need an interpreter. Thank you so very much, and I just want to say, although it's clear where my bias lies, I never meant to offend anybody during this presentation, and I hope you excuse my cheeky sense of humour. Thank you very much once again. Goodbye.